Okay, Daddy, you gonna help me take the trees outside? Hey guys, what's up? I'm Rachel. If you're new here, welcome to the weekly garden tour. This is where I talk about what's going on in my garden, what's going really well, what's not going so well, how I'm solving those problems, and what's coming up next. For all of you who saw the garden tour last week, you might notice that my tomatoes are not planted out the way that I thought that they would be. It looked like the weather was going to be nice, and then over a couple of days the weather changed, and we actually just last night had a low of 36 Fahrenheit, which is technically a frost. So had to wait to put out the tomatoes. That's, I think, 3 days after our estimated last frost date, and that's why these are estimates, and why you have to watch the weather before you're putting your plants out. But looking at the 10-day forecast, I'm thinking either tomorrow or the next day I'm going to have the time and it's going to be the right temperature to go ahead and get those tomatoes planted out. You might also have seen that I have some new plants. These are blueberry bushes that I got from the Clemson Botanical Gardens plant sale. They're bluebell, otherwise known as rabbit eye, and they are specifically adapted for the southern states of the US. So I'm pretty excited to put these in the berry patch. I also got a few other cool plants. I got some lemongrass, and then up here we can see I did get some chives because all the chives I planted just didn't even germinate at all. I got a new oregano plant because I'm worried that the one that I have isn't going to come back. I got this thing, which is actually really interesting. So this is actually marked as a curry plant, which I had not heard of. I have bought curry leaves to use in the past, but I'd never heard of curry plant, and it does kind of smell like curry, so I thought I would pick it up. The Latin name is Mariah coengi. I also did grab some tomatillo plants. I had not planned on growing tomatillos. I've kind of struggled with them in the past, but these plants were not super expensive and they looked really good, and I thought, oh, why not? Why not try again? It's been a couple of years. I've learned a lot. Maybe they'll do better. As far as the other starts are doing, the ginger has come up and is looking pretty good. That'll go out along with the peppers in May. Similar with the basil, I have many different kinds of basil. I've got Thai basil, purple basil, lemon basil, cinnamon basil, Emily basil, which is like kind of a regular sweet basil. And I think somewhere I might have Tulsi. Oh yeah, here it is. Tulsi, right here. So lots of different basils. Tulsi is sometimes called holy basil. Pepper starts, I really should probably have potted them up by now. They're in these tiny little cells, and you can see that's why the leaves are looking not the best color green. But I really wanted to wait until tomatoes had gone out because the space I have indoors is kind of limited, and I thought once these get planted out, I'll have this much room for peppers to expand into larger cups. We were talking in my Patreon only Discord, and I wanted to show you guys. So we were talking about tomato that Danica had that was permanently stunted, seemed to not be growing anything beyond its first true leaf. And this plant I had was similar. It just had one leaf and it was not getting bigger despite all the other ones growing nicely. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to tell you guys that this is normal. This happens sometimes. Sometimes a plant just doesn't grow for whatever reason. Maybe it's a genetic thing, just like sometimes there are babies born with genetic issues. Same thing for plants. Some seeds just have an inherent genetic issue that prevents them from growing normally. And if it's just one or two in your entire batch of seedlings, then it's not really much to worry about. This is why we plant extra seedlings along with, acts of nature. Maybe your cat, for example, eats the top of one off, or I've left mine outside during the day. Sometimes if they're too small, bugs will eat them down even in the trays. So that's why I always have a bunch of extra seedlings. But I just wanted you guys to know that the plants like this, they're not your fault. Sometimes this just happens. And the Discord that we're having that conversation in, if you haven't heard, I do have a Patreon Discord. You can always check the link for that in my description. I'll also be putting out the marigolds with the tomatoes. Some of them are already flowering, which means I might have started them just a little bit too early. Eggplant starts are looking great. These are going to go out in May with the peppers. And you can see a lot of my hot peppers actually are still small. I found hot peppers tend to grow just a little bit slower. And then I've got a bunch of flower starts here. My zinnias and cosmos and nasturtiums. Kata looks like she's sitting quietly right now. Yeah, you heard your name. But she's been running around like a mad cat the whole time I've been filming today. This past week we had one day where it was raining all day, just regularly, and I noticed little baby mushrooms coming up all over the garden. These are the ones that I left in place because they were tiny, and I thought they might get bigger, but they did not. But these are the wine cap mushrooms that I planted. Maybe they're from spring of last year, maybe they're from the ones that I planted about a month ago. And if you follow me on Instagram, you saw the harvest that I got. I did finally get to cook some wine cap mushrooms, and they were delicious. I did them the way I always do, like little bits of mushrooms where it's not really enough for a full meal. I saute them in butter and then finish them off with a little bit of soy sauce. I think if I'd come through and continued watering these mushrooms after it stopped raining, they might have continued to grow, but instead they dried out and stayed small. Alright, so let's take a look at how the rest of the garden is doing. My single row of garlic underneath this trellis here is looking amazing. These are getting really big. As I mentioned before, this is really big for garlic. This is a variety called Dixon Softneck that I got from the Experimental Farm Network. And it was pretty big last year as well. So this is the size that I expected it to be. But I just wanted to say that because if your garlic is not this big, you probably don't need to worry because this is especially large. Garlic is going to keep growing until midsummer. I'm not really expecting to harvest bulbs of garlic until mid-June, early July-ish, and I'll be able to tell that it's ready once the tops start really dying back. Are you guys fighting? Oh! Draco! This second row here with all of the onions has a few lettuces here. I actually have started pulling off of these. I'll usually harvest from the outside in, so like if I was harvesting this one I would take this leaf here. Mostly because these inner leaves are actually doing most of the photosynthesis, and the older these leaves get, the less useful they are to the plant anyway. So I can get my nice big leaves and not feel like I'm really hindering the growth of the plant. My little patch of radishes is developing nicely. You can see down in here these roots forming. They're not actually growing as fast as I might expect, especially with the leaves. I thought the leaves would grow up a lot bigger, but I guess the fluctuation in temperature hasn't been great for them. I mean, last night it got down to 36 Fahrenheit, and today it is 70 degrees outside. That's about 19 Celsius, I think. These are also planted pretty densely, so that's potentially part of why they are staying a little bit smaller. Further down here I have all of my potatoes. Specifically, I'm excited about the purple potatoes. You can see kind of the purple tinge on the leaves here, but the potatoes will come out completely purple, which is just absolutely beautiful. These are a determinate variety, and I have over here Sarpo Mira potatoes, which are new to me this year. I'm actually not entirely sure if they're determinate or indeterminate. We'll have to figure that out as we go. If we take a closer look at the onions here, you see how this is just barely starting to fatten up at the tip. Onions are just now starting to bulb out a little bit, but I'm still expecting at least another month and a half on these before they are ready to harvest. A few of them are going to flower as well, and while this will affect the storage of the onion, it won't affect the edibility of it at all. So I'm just going to let them all flower if they want, and just make sure I eat those onions first and enjoy the beautiful flowers. Moving on to the third row, which is mostly the trellises. I've got my onions and garlic on the outside, peas on the inside. These are continuing to grow, but I am losing hope that I will actually get any peas from them again. Not really sure what I could have done differently, except not plant them in the spring and instead plant them sooner in the fall. Like I mentioned, the temperature fluctuations in the spring here are hot, cold, where it's like too cold for something like tomatoes, but like too hot during the day for something like peas. So, you know, I'm gonna make the best of my climate. I think I mentioned perhaps shade cloth in the future might be helpful for these guys, but that's something that's not really in the budget right now, so we'll have to look for other ways and wait for a year that it can be in the budget. Past the trellises are my fava beans and a couple of random plants. There's I think sunflower here. Pretty sure it's a sunflower. There's still a small chance that it's a zinnia, and a random purple potato that came up here, but most of these are fava beans, and they're looking pretty good, growing steadily. I think a couple of them looked like they're starting to make the beginnings of flower buds, so I'm really hoping to get a harvest off of these, and even if I don't, they are doing a good job prepping the soil. If I turn around to the fourth row, I've still got quite a few weeds going on in here, but these are my poppies. They do look like they are a little upset with the frost that happened last night. You can see that damage on the leaf there, but by and large they look fine. There's just a few clovers trying to come up in between them. So this Brussels sprout over by the cats has gone to seed, and interestingly, this one has not yet. It was actually one of the ones I got from the store, one of the ones that actually didn't die when we had that really deep freeze in January, I believe. And it is making little tiny Brussels sprouts. I'm not entirely sure if they'll be big enough to be like a meal or anything. They're edible at any size, but these are still like teeny. This is not even worth harvesting size currently. And then we get down to the front of the row where all the lettuces are. These are the best looking lettuces. You can see they're growing quite quickly now. I've actually been harvesting off of these for salads, same as before, outer leaves. And again, I will point out if you missed it, these two are the same variety, seeds planted at the same time. The only difference is that this one was transplanted about 2 weeks after that one. So this one has just been in the ground longer, and that seems to make a big difference in how fast they grow. And growth with plants tends to take off kind of exponentially. The smaller it is, the less leaves it has to photosynthesize and make sugars. And so the bigger it is, the more leaves it has to make sugars and photosynthesize to feed even more leaves, and that just keeps growing faster and faster. So even just a little bit of difference in when they were given proper nutrition, or a little difference in time spent without enough water, can make a big difference in how big the plant can get by the end of the season. Since we're talking about mushrooms this week, I'm going to bring you guys up to check on the mushroom logs. I actually forgot to check on them yesterday, like I meant to, and yeah. So I saw briefly this right here. This is lion's mane, which, like the other mushrooms, kind of came up and then dried out, and yeah, nothing much more happened with that. So that is my bad. However, these have been mostly growing, not lion's mane, but this, whatever this is. It kind of looks like turkey tail, but not quite right for turkey tail. So I'm sure it's a relative, a similar mushroom. All right, let's take a look at the raised beds. The cilantro is starting to actually make little flowers, which is very cute. My lavender has been putting on new growth, which is really good. However, the oregano has not. As I said, I'm wondering if maybe the freeze did kill it after all. I thought it might come back, but I haven't really seen any evidence of that. So there's a chance that it's fully dead, and if it is, I'll take it out. But I'm gonna give it just like a little bit more of a chance. My sage is still making its little flower here. And I want to point out the difference in shape of the leaves. So most of the time, sage leaves look like this with the round. And then right here near the flower, they're starting to get kind of sharp tips. So I think that's kind of interesting to see. The thyme is in full bloom now. It is gorgeous. The little carrots I have in this container, still alive, still doing pretty good. Yeah, maybe I'm gonna actually get some carrots. We'll see. And then in this much newer raised bed, I've got my lettuces here at the top, and I planted a lemon thyme over here that I got from the store. It smells amazing. I don't know what I'm going to do with it herbally. If you know what to do with lemon thyme, let me know. But even if all I ever do is sniff it, I think it's worth planting because it makes me so happy. And then the berry patch. Those blueberry bushes that I showed you earlier, I think I'm going to put in, I'm probably going to replace this guy. It has been small and stunted for a while, and I might throw the other one in here in this space because this one is also not been looking super great. We are so close to having ripe strawberries. These little green berries are everywhere right now. Oh, there's going to be so many of them. I cannot wait. I come check every day to see if there's any ripe berries, but things like this always take a little bit longer to ripen than you expect. Like tomatoes, for instance, I'll start seeing baby tomatoes, and by now I know that that means it's like a month and a half before I actually harvest my first tomatoes, which is way longer than I would have ever expected as a new gardener. I was also looking at these white flowers thinking, those are kind of white for strawberry, and then I realized that that is attached to my blackberry bush. So we have our first beautiful opening blackberry flowers. There's also a chance that I put that extra blueberry bush here. This was supposed to be a third raspberry, but it never really came up. Although these two that are here are absolutely thriving. You can see the flowers coming in on these as well, and I'm sure you can hear the bees buzzing around on them. I also want to point out to you, I think you can see it on camera, some of the leaves are a much lighter green than other leaves. And sometimes if you have leaves like that, it can mean a nutrient deficiency, but in this case it's just the color that new leaves are when they're coming in. If you look closer, you can see that the smaller, newer leaves are this brighter green, and the bigger, older leaves are a darker green. Alright guys, that is all I have for you for the garden tour today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you want to catch up on garden tours, if you're new, you haven't seen them before, I'll leave playlists up here for this year and last year. Thank you guys so much, and until next time, happy gardening.